All right, let's dive into something pretty fascinating. We're going to look at this really old, kind of strange law about how to build an altar. And yeah, on the surface, it sounds like an ancient construction manual. But if you look closer, it's actually this incredible parable for our spiritual lives, a story that gets to the heart of how we really grow. And right away, this whole thing kicks off with a paradox, a question that honestly just seems impossible. Think about it. How are you supposed to build something perfect if you're not allowed to use any tools? I mean, tools are how we make things perfect, right? It's a total riddle, but stick with me, because the answer, well, it changes everything. So, where does this riddle come from? Right here. It's an explicit command from Exodus about building an altar out of stone. The rule is simple. Do not use a tool on it. No shaping, no cutting, no trying to perfect it yourself. Why? Because the moment you do, the text says you profane it. You make it unholy. So what in the world is going on here? Okay, so you have to understand the context here, because this is what makes it so important. This isn't some random rule buried in the footnotes. No, this command is the very first thing mentioned right after the Ten Commandments. I mean, think about that. Its placement at the absolute top of the list tells us this is a huge, foundational principle. It's setting the stage for everything else. So, to crack this riddle, we've got to get this symbolism right. In this whole parable, the altar, it's not just a pile of rocks. The altar is the human heart. It's the very core of who we are, right? The place where we connect with God. So this law was never about ancient construction projects. It's always been about the transformation of our inner lives. All right, so if the altar is the heart, then what does it mean to profane it with a tool? Well, this is where the parable gets really personal. It points directly to something we all do, that very human tendency to try and fix ourselves, through sheer willpower and self-effort. So, what are our tools today? Well, think about it. There are detailed plans, our super strict disciplines, our rule following, all those self-help strategies. We see a flaw in ourselves, a rough edge on our character. And what do? We grab a metaphorical hammer and chisel and just start chipping away, trying to make ourselves look better, feel more righteous. And then it gets even more interesting. The very next verse adds another layer to this. It says you shouldn't even build man-made steps to get up to the altar. I mean, doesn't that sound a lot like our modern 5 steps to a better you programs? The text is basically saying that all these attempts to elevate ourselves don't actually work. In fact, they do the opposite. They just end up exposing our flaws, our nakedness, even more. And this right here, this is the frustrating cycle that so many of us get caught in, isn't it? We try to fix our own hearts with our own effort. We set these impossible standards and, well, we fail. Then comes the discouragement. We start questioning our own worth. And what's our solution? We decide we just need to try harder, and the whole exhausting, draining cycle starts all over again. This leads us to a really key distinction, the difference between legalism and true lawfulness. See, legalism is when we pick up our own tools. It's kind of ironic, right? It's a lawless attempt to become lawful, because you're actually breaking that very first rule, don't use a tool. True lawfulness, on the other hand, that's something else entirely. It's about putting down the hammer, stepping back, and trusting that there's a master craftsman already on the job. So, this is where we get to the solution, and it's such a beautiful alternative to all our harsh, self-inflicted striving. There is another way for the altar of our heart to be built. It's a process that's gentle, patient, and, in the end, perfect. So the law tells us, point blank, put down your tools. You're forbidden from shaping, from cutting, from trying to perfect the stones for the altar. And at first, that might sound really frustrating, like a limitation. But it's not. It's actually an invitation. The reason we're told not to shape the stones is because they are already being shaped. There's a process at work that has nothing to do with our anxious effort. So how does this happen? Well, it's not with a hammer and a chisel. It's more like gentle rain on a rock or a river flowing over a stone. It's that natural process of erosion. It's slow. It's patient. You can barely see it happening day by day. But over time, it creates something so perfectly smooth and beautiful, not through force, but through a persistent, gentle presence. And you know what that is? That is the very definition of grace. Think about it. The ancient builders didn't have to make the stones. They just had to find them, already shaped by nature. They were a gift. And it's the exact same way with our hearts. A transformed heart isn't something we achieve through our own hard work. It's a gift that we receive when we trust in a process that's way bigger than us. Okay, so what happens when that stone is finally ready, when it's been shaped by this natural, gentle process? What happens to a heart that's been prepared not by our own anxious striving, but by this divine grace? Well, it becomes ready for its real purpose. And this is where the whole metaphor just clicks into place. The law said that once this altar of natural, unhewn stones was built, the words of the law itself were supposed to be written right on them. That physical act was a foreshadowing, a picture of this incredible spiritual promise, that one day God's ways wouldn't be written on cold stone tablets, but would be written directly on our hearts. And get this, the law wasn't just supposed to be, painted on the surface. It was to be written very distinctly. The Hebrew word they use here is ba'ar. It means to dig, to engrave, to dig out the true meaning of something and make it totally clear. So we're not talking about just memorizing rules. We're talking about having the very spirit and meaning of them engraved deep into the core of who you are. And all of this leads to a final and absolutely critical shift in our mindset. The difference between a heart we've tried to chisel out ourselves through fear and effort, and a heart that's been shaped by a relationship of trust, well, it's the difference between thinking like a slave and living like a son. I mean, just think about the difference for a second. A slave obeys a command because they have to, out of duty or fear. They don't need to understand why. But a son obeys because he understands and he agrees with his father's heart. The motivation is completely different. It's not fear, it's love. He's not just following external rules, he's internalized the very will of his father. And that's the whole point, isn't it? The goal was never to create an army of perfect rule followers. It's to cultivate sons and daughters who don't just know what to do, but who deeply, truly understand the loving wisdom behind why they're doing it. And so we come full circle. That unhewn altar, perfect without a single mark from a human tool, becomes this beautiful, perfect picture of what our hearts are meant to be. It's a heart that has finally put down the hammer and the chisel. A heart that has stopped striving and trying to fix itself, and has finally started to trust the gentle, patient work of the master craftsman. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. We're so conditioned to always ask, what must I do? But what if that's not the right question? What if the truly life-changing question is, what am I allowing to be done in me? What if it's less about our doing and all about our allowing, our willingness to be shaped by a hand that is so much more skilled than our own?